No?
Crickets.
Yeah, that means everybody is gobbling it up. They love every second of it.
Well, come on, Aristotle's pretty intense.
Yeah. I think that's just going to be how this first 8-week unit goes, is kind of just breaking you in and getting you used to this elliptical, incomplete style of an Aristotelian text. And when we continue with Aristotle after a little break, I think a lot of this is going to seem, you're going to be familiar with it. And you'll have that 4-week break for it to kind of gel in your head. And then when you re-encounter it, it's going to be like you're going to recognize a lot of it. And so you're going to have that moment of recognition that helps you get past some of the speed bumps that Aristotle will put in your way. But the first 8 weeks is just kind of banging your head against these texts and doing your best to draw something out of them, something substantive. All right, looks like we're getting close to everybody being here. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for your persistence. Good to see all the familiar faces. So today I want to discuss with you knowledge and cause. Those are our main concerns. And I want to talk a little bit about what I assigned in the Nicomachean Ethics and in the physics. And if we get to it, we'll get back to the first book of the metaphysics. So I apologize for the detour. I hope you were able to take it with us, but if not, there's still, maybe before next week, you can catch up on that. So, oh, sorry, I just heard an echo. Okay, everybody cool? All right, so I'm starting off today. I wanted to start with a little thought experiment. And it's a thought experiment whose intention is to illuminate a little bit the point of Aristotle's 4 causes. So I'm going to run into it. This is not a final account of the 4 causes, but I especially am interested in what is most difficult for us, which is namely for the sake of which. When I was in Germany studying Greek philosophy, the Germans always only ever refer to it as the houhenika. They always use the Greek in order not to get any modern associations, contaminating Aristotle's conception. So if I slip into houhenika, that merely means for the sake of which that Aristotle talks about. All right, so let's do this little thought experiment. Just kind of follow me on this story. So the one thing I would like you to imagine is a race of creatures just like us, except they don't have eyesight. They don't have eyes. Okay, but otherwise they're just like us. Now, and now imagine that walking on the beach one day, 2 of these other beings stumble upon something very strange on the beach, namely what we would call an eyeball. And now, of course, they wouldn't be able to see it, but they could feel it. And it doesn't feel like anything else that they've ever encountered. Now, they don't know what it is. It's just a hunk of gelatinous flesh to them. Now, these guys are scientists. They take it back to the lab and they dissect it, they reconstruct it, they irradiate it, they put it in acids and they put it in bases, and they write reams and reams of journals about the internal structure of this gelatinous substance. And they are able to fill libraries with information about the parts and the materials and right and their interactions, their causal interactions. They have great amount of knowledge, what we would call knowledge about this thing. But what's important for me here is this. They wouldn't know, and they would never be able to find out what this thing does, what its huhenica is. Because they don't, not having eyesight, they don't know it's a thing. So, but we know that these things are for seeing because we see with them. And it's on the basis of our knowing that the function or the huhenica of this eyeball is to see. It is because we know that, and that is the entryway into not only being able to give reams of pages of description about what's there, but we can even ascend, right? We can ascend to knowing why those parts are there, why certain elements are present, why certain molecules are present, why certain muscles are present. And we would know why certain things are certain distances from one another. And because we would know that other structures would not enable this thing to see. And so it is because that it's when you know for the sake of which, that everything falls into place. We know why it has the shape it has. We know why it has the texture it has. We know why it has the viscosity that it has. We know why certain elements are present and others are not. We know why certain muscles are connected to each other, right? It's all organized around the huhenica, all organized around the for the sake of which. And so even though we have not lots of knowledge, so our alternative Earth creatures, they have lots of knowledge that they have lots of information about this gelatinous substance, but they have no idea why it's put together, put together in the way it is, why it has the matter that it does, why it has the shape that it does. And yeah, exactly. And why the particular movements that are unique to it, why it has those movements and not other movements. So by virtue of for the sake of which, we have been able to ascend from sheer knowledge of unrelated particulars to knowledge of the whole. And the knowledge of the whole is that which allows us to explain the why of the structure, the matter, the motion. I'll bring that. So when we look at this eyeball, we would be able to say that, what it is answerable once you know the end, the for the sake of which. And that is the key to unlocking why it is the way it is, and that thereby understanding why it's this matter, why it's this shape, and why these motions. Otherwise, we would just have a long series of a bunch of information that would be generated by our experiments with it. But the experiments themselves would not be based on trying to understand sight. They would just be understand it as what it is for this alien species. Because once you take the end away, once you take the function or the for the sake of which away, what you are left with is nothing but a heap of accidental properties. And there's just nothing else there but the matter. The matter put together accidentally, doing something accidental, having an accidental shape, doing accidental things. In principle, you have the ontology of modern science. And it's not because, and the ontology of modern science is, right, it's not because, it's not that it's wrong, far from it, but the valorization of everything's an accident is itself a consequence of a particular way of examining things. One last point I'd like to make on this. I mean, people who are interested in Heidegger, he talks about, in Being and Time, the primordial disclosure of things in the understanding of them. And this is precisely the structure that he reveals as what's foundational in all comprehension. All comprehension is, it moves toward an understanding of the function of things. And in the revelation of, or in the comprehension of this end, or for the sake of which the unity of things becomes clear. And that's what allows them to be used, to employed, to become instruments for other things. Not because it's a billiard ball universe and certain things cause other things, just by setting them in motion, but rather because for Heidegger it's Dasein, for Aristotle it's Nous. It is this disclosure of the for the sake of which, as making things available to human beings. That is their fundamental availability. So I wanted to do this little thought experiment just to show up why Aristotle might think the for the sake of which is as a cause, and why it's essential for the knowledge of anything. And I think the example makes clear that the for the sake of which is the function of the thing. It is not some providential divine plan that is always the boogeyman of contemporary science. Aristotle is showing us something about what it is to understand something at all, or even better, what it is to understand something as something. And the for the sake of which is essential to that. And where there's no for the sake of which, there's nothing, but there's no unity. We don't know how or why the various parts fit together. It's just a brute fact. All right, see a couple of hands. I kind of figured that would provoke a couple remarks. I think I saw Tim and then Tyler. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I thought I was tracking really well with what you were saying until you said what you have without the for the sake of which is the ontology of science. And I thought, because I thought that science always has to have a why. That's what it's seeking. So it doesn't just assert brute facts. That's not how I understand science.
No, yeah, no, of course, yeah. What I said, the ontology. What I meant was that a thing is nothing other than a heap of accidental properties, and that's that sheer contingency, which we hear about all the time in modern science. That is a function of how it thinks cause. And so I just wanted to point out that not only that Aristotle is doing something different, but But when he's talking about knowledge, he's talking not about predictive success, but he's talking about what it is, what the criteria are that allow us to say that we know a thing. So I'm going to come right back. I need some water because when I talk, my mouth dries out. But Tyler, if you want to go ahead. Otherwise, I'll be back in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that one of the things the different sciences or disciplines, we might say, have in common is that in order to understand why they as method are organized in a certain way, you need the understanding of what end they pursue. And in the case of modern science, its end is not to know what beings are ontologically or metaphysically. And that's the point. The end of making technology or predicting is not the same as the end of determining what is.
Right.
And so it also, and this is, I think, a point Heidegger also makes, since he was mentioned, is that because of that, science cannot explain its own methodology. The explanation of what that science is has to come from a different discipline, which is why philosophy or something like that would have to be prior.
Right. So hopefully the eyeball example, I mean, not only shows you the importance of the Huhenica, but it also suggests why we might be tempted to say that without the Huhenica, we don't really have any knowledge of the why of this thing. And it's not always the case that knowing the Huhenica it gives us the why. And what's interesting is I think in the case of the eyeball that Aristotle, who often says the form of something is the same as its Huhenica, it's for the sake of which. And so the form of the eye is not going to be the shape of it. That is going to belong to its matter. But the form of the eye is seeing, and the end of the eye is to see. And so here the eye the formal cause coincides with the final cause. So we're going to get into this stuff, but I just kind of wanted to show why one might want to include in what it is to understand why something is the way it is. It's not enough to say, well, let's look at the things that cause motion in it, right? That when something bumps into it, what happens? The four causes are what Aristotle draws out of his understanding of what it is to understand anything. And that understanding of something as what it is what he calls knowledge. All right. Any other questions or remarks, or anybody who doesn't quite understand why I was talking about this eyeball or what the eyeball is supposed to teach us? That was an awesome time to raise them.
How do we spell Huhenica?
Oh, well, the Anglification would be the H-O-U. That would be the first word. And then H-E-N-E-K-A. Huhenica, perfect. Yeah, that's right, Garth. So the nice thing about the Huhenica as a term is it doesn't get us involved in all of the contemporary debates about God or science and all the rest of it. It's the function of the thing. And I was planning on getting on this later, but I'm on a roll right now, so I'm just going to mention it. This function, which is the end, is what we're always asking about when we ask, what is that thing? And our language kind of displays this, because often we ask the question, what is that thing? We say instead, what does that thing do? Yeah. What does that thing, what does the screw do? Right? I find a screw on the countertop. What does that do? And I think that it's interesting that that's kind of an unconscious use of language. And when we ask ourselves, how do we understand this question? I think all of us will be aware of the fact that when we ask this question, we're not saying, what kind of agency does the screw have? Or what kind of soul does it have that allows it to walk about or to do things? So, but rather, our original disclosure of the being of the thing, to use Heideggerian terms, right, is in terms of what accounts for it being the way it is. This shape, this head, this little cross on the top of the screw, right? What does it do? What function does it have? What is its end? Okay, so here, and I think this is super important, and we're going to need this for Aristotle, right? That we learned a little bit about particular substance and universal substances, and we haven't really learned how to talk about them yet. But right now I'm giving you this clue to help you further on down the line that this substance is going to be the act of the thing. The act of anything that is its act. And that act comes out in our language when we ask, what's that thing do? And right now, we're being introduced to the act of the being of anything in Aristotle's term, huhenika. So when we talk about things as acts, we're not talking about them as ensouled. We're not talking about them as having agency or making decisions or deliberating, but the kind of thing that they are, that which accounts for why they're shaped the way they are, why they have the matter that they do, etc. What accounts for all of that is its act, or I've been using its function or its huhenika. Go ahead, Tim.
I'm just going to confess I don't get the distinction yet, and I guess maybe we'll go on, but I'm not getting it because it sounds like when we talk about why is the thing the way it is, that says science to me. And if we say, oh, for what purpose is it? What does it do? I might misappropriate what it does, but I am asking that question. But so I don't quite get it, because there seems to be a conflation in how I'm hearing you talk about it between why it is the way it is. Why is it shaped like that? Well, it has to be shaped like that either because of causes that made it be shaped like that, or me assigning it a purpose that's independent of its shape per se. So I don't quite get the distinction yet. Maybe as we go on, we'll talk about it, but yeah, I'm not getting it yet.
Fair enough. Let's hear some other voices before we head out. I see Tom, then Tyler.
Yes, I like to perhaps.
What was that?
We have an echo coming from Clark.
Yeah, I think Clark needs to.
Okay.
I just muted Clark, so if that was the source of it, we know it's Clark's microphone and
Let me try again.
his sound
Tom.
stuff.
Okay, I think maybe we should perhaps introduce the term telos, but that's unrelated to my raising the hand. I like to bring your example and raise you one and ask if you can bring the same analysis to a pebble or a mountain, something that is inanimate, as opposed to something that is from something living or some man-made object. That's it.
Okay, yeah. The answer is no. The more the more structured by an end a thing is, either through its own end or because an end is imposed on it, the more intelligible it is. To the extent to which there's no huhenica to be found, we will never be able to know why a thing has the shape, the matter, the nature that it has. So I think you're right to bring that out. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, I was gonna actually bring up a couple examples. One would be just a bookmark, right? In order to be a bookmark, something has to have a certain shape. It has to be made of something that is not going to damage a book. It has to there are all sorts of properties in virtue of which something can function as a bookmark. However, you can look at that object in a way that abstracts from a context in which it's being used as a bookmark. And then as a piece of paper, say, right, you don't have a clear understanding of why it's arranged in the way that it is. So it's like a pebble, effectively. And so there are different things that we can think of as having a function in one context, but that doesn't necessarily always explain why they are the way they are. Like, I can find a use for a pebble, but that doesn't explain its unity. It only explains why I'm doing what I'm doing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So we might find a rock and use it as a decoration or as a paperweight or something like that. But there's an important difference there, I think.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how to follow up on that, except that the understanding of ends is essential to understanding what knowledge is, and therefore knowledge of the highest knowledge, which is the knowledge of the first causes, is. And since that is a concept that I think is often misrepresented, I wanted to give another take for you to marinate in for a little bit and see how it works for you in the experience of unlocking this text. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just it just kind of struck me that your answer to Tom seemed to imply to me that a pebble then doesn't have being. If being, I heard you saying earlier that for anything to be what it is, that is to be something,
Mm-hmm.
it must be known according to its for which.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard you answer Tom and say that things like pebbles and things in nature have less of a for which than things that are man-made.
Mm-hmm. Or
And
living. Yeah.
then I just heard you say we must know things like in nature according to their first cause,
Mm-hmm.
which which almost like implies to me then that there must be a purpose other than cause. Like the first cause must have purpose to it,
Mm-hmm.
that it imputes to everything it causes that's apart from cause itself. So anyway, I'm just wanting to say I'm still confused, and it doesn't seem to be a coherent position to me yet.
Okay. Just keep asking. I don't want to get too far afield. But yeah. So we need to look more into what a primary cause is, and certainly what a primary cause is not fundamentally going to be a temporally first cause, but that which is most explanatory of the thing. And so there's going to be different primary causes depending on the kinds of things we're inquiring into. So yeah, if we're thinking about primary causes, temporally primary cause, then we're only thinking of cause in terms of a starting point of motion rather than a starting point of form or of end. And so I'm not sure if you were, Tim, I'm not imputing that to you. I'm just saying that that might be a way of misunderstanding this. Okay, so since we jumped into causes, and so let's take a look at the physics that I assigned. Hopefully everybody has a copy of this. And we'll take a look at, first of all, his discussion of causes, and let's talk about it a little bit, make sure that, and clarify any problems. And then I'd like to talk or discuss a little bit with you why he makes a big deal out of coincidental causes. Seems like a strange thing. It's not something that we think about very much. And so I wanted to dive into that text a little bit. But before I do, Tyler, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to explain briefly why I brought up the examples I did. One thing I was considering getting at was some things supply their own end in a sense. So anything living, right, have ends in themselves in some sense. And then some things only are understood as having an end for something outside of them. And so when it comes to things that can serve a function for a living being, that's different than a living being which has ends in a very different sense. So the relationship of ends for things that are not living is very different than for things that are living.
Right. Agreed. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, so everybody, Bo, do you happen to have physics, or whoever does the screen sharing? Let's look at book. So that would be page 24 in the handout, or the entire text that I gave you from Reeve. Oh, so that's the Nicomachean Ethics. That would be book 6 of the Ethics. What I'm hoping we'll get is book 2 of, oh, right, there we go. Oh, thank you, Bo. Yeah, a little bit further. Right.
I think that's Peter. Good job, Peter.
Yeah, so book 2, chapter 3. Yeah, having determined these things. Awesome. So let's read the first 2 paragraphs out loud, and then talk about them. And maybe my example is helpful, maybe it's not helpful for explicating this, but I'm probably going to try to use it anyway. Would somebody volunteer to read for me 2 paragraphs?
I will read.
Thank you.
All right, starting with having determined.
Yeah.
All right, having determined these things, we should investigate how many and what sorts of causes there are. For since our work is undertaken for the sake of knowledge, and we do not think we have knowledge of each thing until we have grasped the why of it, which is to grasp its primary cause, it is clear that we must do this in the case of coming to be, passing away, and every sort of natural change, so that by knowing the starting points of these, we may try to refer back to each thing we are inquiring about to them. And I'm continuing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Something is said to be a cause if it is, 1, the component from which a thing comes to be. For example, the bronze of a statue or the silver of a bowl, and also the kinds, genus of these. The form or paradigm, or 2, the form or paradigm, that is the account, logos, of the essence, and kinds, genus of this, for example, of the octave, the ratio, logos, 2, 1, and number in general, and the parts included in the account. 3, further, that from which the change or rest from change first starts. For example, the person who has deliberated its cause of the action, and the father of his child, and in general, the producer is cause of the thing being produced, and the change maker of what is changed being changed. 4, further, the end, and this is the for the sake of which, for example, of taking walks, health is the end. For why does he take walks? In order that he may be healthy, we say. And in speaking the way we think, we have presented the cause. Also, anything, then, that comes to be as an intermediate means to an end, to the end, when something else has started the movement. For example, in the case of health, making thin, purging, drugs, or instruments, since all these are for the sake of the end, although they differ from each other in that some are instruments and other works.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. So we encountered this in the metaphysics, and it's being repeated here in that first paragraph. Since our work is undertaken for the sake of knowledge, and we do not think we have knowledge of each thing until we have grasped the why of it, which is to grasp its primary cause. Okay, so here we can see that Aristotle is thinking about and taking examples, everyday examples of how people spontaneously, or I don't want to say spontaneously, but how they show that they've understood the why of something, and and that knowing this is a deeper or a more adequate form of knowledge than being able to name things or to talk about behaviors without being able to say why. So this is a book on the physics, and the physics studies beings or being insofar as it changes, and so that's why in this paragraph he talks about finding the causes of coming to be, passing away, and every sort of natural change. Okay, so in the metaphysics, we're not looking for the causes of change. We're looking just for the highest causes per se. But in the physics, I just want to make sure that that it's clear that we don't get these definitions mixed up. That we're taking some aspect of being. We don't really know what being is yet, but we're taking some aspect of it and making that that subset of being. And what defines that subset of being is that that things change in that subset. And that is going to be the object of a science that he calls physics, or we should probably just say nature. It's the science of nature, because Fusai is their word for nature. Does anybody have any questions or remarks about that first paragraph that they want, they'd like to talk about before we move on to the causes?
I have a question. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Yeah, that's cool.
Do you think that efficient cause is roughly analogous to sufficient cause, as people think these days, and like the other three are what you would call necessary causes, or would you say that that's not a good comparison?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, necessary and sufficient conditions are terms of logical analysis, and efficient cause is the attribution of a why, and so and I'm not, to be honest, I'm not really quite sure how to approach that. I mean, my first gut reaction here is to say, well, no, because that's something that something is moved does not account for why, or if one thing moves another, the way in which that second thing moves is not accounted for by what moves it. All right. So a rock hits a flower and it moves in a particular way, or a rock hits another rock and it moves in another particular way, or a rock hits us and our bodies react in a very different way than another rock or the flower. Right. And so each one of these is going, the way in which each thing responds is not going to be sufficiently accounted for by merely discussing or merely describing the thing that moved it. So I would say that an efficient cause, roughly understood, is not a sufficient a cause of anything. I don't know if that's helpful or if that's the response you expected, but
No, that's very helpful.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? So in a sense, I put in chat earlier about a pebble falling. Isn't that essentially its motion? It's a very, very simple motion, or
Yeah.
so physics does study it to that extent.
Right.
But it's not nearly, and then I guess he also considers that as a self matter is that which falls down, I guess, and fire goes up or whatever.
Yeah. 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 The nature of things that don't have an end in them is kind of peculiar, and I don't completely understand it. So I'm not going to insist on anything here, right? I mean, whether a pebble is its own unity, or we need some kind of higher order thing like Earth or universal attraction or something like that, or as Empedocles says, love and strife. Do we need love and strife to understand what keeps a pebble together? Yeah, I'd say yeah, probably. And so the being of the pebble lies elsewhere. And so that's kind of how I'd want to talk about this, but we'd have to read more closely some of the discussion of the physics, and we'll get to that a little bit in the metaphysics as well. So hopefully people remember these questions and can ask them again at the appropriate juncture. But I appreciate it because these are super important questions. Any other comments or remarks about this first paragraph?
But I had a question.
Yeah.
Primary cause, as it's used at line 20,
Yeah.
sounds like what I think of as final cause, especially when it's described as the why of it. Is that correct to just say it's a terminology issue, but they're the same thing, primary cause and final cause?
I don't think so. I think that I think the primary cause is kind of a generic term. Say when we do physics or when we do metaphysics, we're looking for what cause ends up being primary as opposed to coincidental. Depends on the kind of thing that we're investigating. And so when we discover what the kind is and the ground of its unity, what makes it one and not a bunch of unrelated stuff, but what makes it one, that which makes it one will be the primary cause.
That helps.
Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, so we don't want to think about the primary cause as like one of the four causes. It is a higher order term, and it gives us something to aim at in our inquiry. We want to get at the primary causes, which means we need to distinguish primary causes from coincidental causes. And so you really put your finger on why I wanted to talk about this coincidental cause stuff later on. So yeah, thank you. Any other questions pop up in the course of our discussion? Okay. Let's see if we can make sense of this rather haphazard list of causes that it gives us in the physics. So let's just take them one at a time, and I'd like to hear what people have to say about it. So the first one, the component from which a thing comes to be For example, the bronze of a statue or the silver of a bull, and also the kinds of these. So what kind of cause is he talking about here? Tyler, go for it.
So there are different materials that things can be made of, but in order to successfully make something, the materials do have to have certain properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cause of, say, the bull with respect to the materials is they're having the kinds of properties that allow something, that material to be formed
Mm-hmm.
to serve the function of holding what bowls hold. So
Right. All right, cool. So we got what we like to call the material cause, but it's kind of interesting. He also mentions the kinds of these, right, as belonging to the material cause. Garth, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought he gave an example of a saw somewhere.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Cut in order to cut wood, it needs to be made of something harder than wood. I don't know where that is.
Yeah. He does do that. I don't remember where either, but yeah, you're right. What made you think of that?
Oh, Tyler's comment, because that seems to be exactly what Aristotle's getting at, right? We only know what different materials are because of the ends that they can be put to.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we didn't know what we could do with iron, like, make things that can chop wood and things that can withstand heat and armor and things, then we wouldn't really know anything about iron if we didn't know these ends.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, so when we think about the bronze and the silver, these seem to be straightforward material causes. It seem to be like the matter of a statue, and but what this statue is not accounted for by the matter alone. But he also mentions these kinds, the kinds. So we're talking about like in our categories, we talk about the particular substance and the particular accident, but we also talk about the universal substance and the universal accident. So even when we're talking about matter, he mentions these higher order causes. So just make sure we're all on the right track, and then I'm going to get to Tim. In the example he gives, what would be the kind of the statue or of the bull? Mike?
So if it were, silver or something, I guess it could be metal.
Yeah, I think that's what he's getting at. So if bronze is the cause of a statue, then metal is the cause of a statue. And here we now have one lower order and one higher order cause. And clearly, metal is only the cause of a statue because the statue is made of bronze. And here we're kind of getting, that was good. So we're getting at what is the more primary cause here. Metal is only a cause because bronze involved. And so we see that it's because it's bronze that it's metal and not the other way around. And so we're starting to see this order of causes as being closer or farther away from the thing that we're trying to comprehend. Tim, go ahead. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, no problem. I may have misunderstood Garth's point, but it just didn't follow to me that we couldn't know anything about bronze unless we made some kind of use about it. I don't know if that was really his point, but if a flower fell on my head and a bronze ore piece fell on my head, I would know something about the bronze ore piece that was different from the flower, right? So it's not, I don't think its being is tied to its use. Its being could be, or my knowledge of its being could just be tied to its effect on my head. Right? I mean, wouldn't I know something about it?
Yes. Well, certainly. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if Garth, do you want to reply? I'm just going to invoke.
That's a good point. I'll have to think about it.
I'm just going to invoke knowledge that is over against knowledge why. Knowing why it had that particular effect is not available in the effect that it had. I mean, you have to go beyond the that to the why in order to account for the particular kind of experience you had. So,
Can I just say that I might have accidentally lowered somebody's hand? I was aiming for Tim, and I think I lowered somebody else's hand. So if you see your hand lowered, it was unintentional.
does anybody have was anybody oppressed by Tim or by Peter? Sorry. Okay, cool. So matter's not necessarily what we think of as matter, and so I just wanted to explore that a little bit. That he brings up the genos, or the genus, the kind that is also. If a species is a cause, then the genus is a cause too. All right. The second one I think is pretty hard, but let's just do our best. The form or paradigm, that is, the account, logos, of the essence, and kinds, genos, of this. For example, of the octave, the ratio 2:1, and number in general, and the parts included in the account. All right. What kind of sense did you make out of this? I mean, I just want to say, I don't have like a definitive thing to say about this. I'm kind of interested in the discussion to see where we go here. I find it irritating that he doesn't give us a nice material concrete object to illustrate this with a numerical ratio is kind of irritating, but okay, that's the one.
I don't have my hand, I'm sorry. But
no, please.
So I'll cut in. I guess with the octave, the ratio is 2:1 in terms of the frequencies, like lower C and then the octave above. So of the octave, the formal cause of that would be that ratio. That's not to explain what he's talking about in terms of this cause, but maybe that example.
Mm-hmm.
And then not vice versa, to continue that. So you have the octave, its cause in a way, formal cause is that ratio 2:1, and that's based on, in turn, on number, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Greg, please.
This is a big maybe conjecture,
Cool.
but to use the statue, and I guess it's still a statue of a horse, or if it's not, to make it a statue of a horse, you'd have to, if you got like a request for a bronze statue of a horse, you would have to know some, well, it would help. I guess someone could show you a picture of a horse, but it would certainly help if you could give an account of one, say that it's a four-legged animal, that's a mammal, that's used to pull stuff or run fast, that people sit on. That would help. But that instant I said that, I thought of, if someone handed you a picture of a horse, you could still do a statue of it without knowing, without being able to give an account of what it is. So yeah, I thought I had something there for a second.
No, it's great to get a little bit messy in this, just to see what what sticks. So no, I totally appreciate it. Clark, go ahead.
Sorry, I've been having computer difficulties.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just what comes to mind is I don't understand logos very well, but I've looked it up, and it has something that's made sense to me as intelligible, traceable order in the nature of things.
Mm.
And there's something, so he's talking about the paradigm, that is the account or the logos of the essence. So
Mhm.
something in that logos has some sort of accounting to it.
Mhm.
And that accounting can be described at different levels of description, 2-to-1 ratio, or the number in general. So he kind of gives an example,
Right.
but and I don't know how he would give a more concrete example since his reference is logos, the essence, which I have tons of questions about. So anyway, that's all I have to offer.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the Greek. Does it? I do have the Greek somewhere. Does anybody happen to look up essence here? I think it might be ousia, but I just want to make sure before I commit on that. Where's my Greek Aristotle here? There it is. Okay, I don't want to get. I don't want to get too.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So ousia is, of course, what we've been calling substance all this time, and so it's frequent that these two concepts get are almost synonymous, almost interchangeable in some Aristotle, but not in every part. So I got two hands here. I'd like to hear what you have to say. I think it was Charles and then Philip. Oh, you're still muted, Charles. There you go.
Sorry, I tend to forget that. Well, my understanding of essence is the essence is what makes a thing to be what it is.
Right.
So the horse that I think Greg was talking about, whatever makes a horse to be what a horse is, that it would be the essence of horse.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it independent. You know, it doesn't depend on, it would make one horse a substance that is not dependent on another, but it would share the same essence. It would share the universal of a horse
Mm-hmm.
with all the rest of the horses. And then I just thought this, you know, the formal cause is as opposed to the material cause. The material cause provides the stuff to make it with. And then the formal cause provides the essence of whatever this is going to be. It's going to make it whatever it is. And in this case, he gives this example, which I'm not sure I understand it, but he gives an example from music here, I suppose, that you know, if it is built on the octave and numbers in general, and the other parts are included in that account, that the essence of this piece or this piece of music would be its numerical structure and the various sounds that are associated with that, and the various sounds that can happen within the context of an octave and various things of that sort. So that's kind of what I got out of this. I must say the example really threw me, and I'm like you, I wish you'd have said, I said, okay, let's talk about a horse here.
Right.
Let's talk about those things that make a horse whatever is a horse. That's the essence of the horse.
Right.
And the participating in the universal and all that. And
you know,
that
what's
is
nice
actually the formal cause.
What's nice about what Mike said before about the octave, about he gave one particular octave, but the C octave or something like that. But there are plenty of other octaves available in music, and each one of them is going to be different, but they're all going to be the same with respect to this 2-to-1 ratio. And so amidst the difference, there is a sameness. And talking about the form gets you to start focusing on what is the same in all of these differences. And so, I invoke unity all the time. I think it's the right thing to invoke a lot in Greek philosophy. So I just wanted to invoke it again here to begin to dispel a little bit of the forbidding terminology that he's using here. What's interesting about the octave is, despite the different sounds, despite the different instruments, despite the different keys, right? They're all distinguished by this 2-1 ratio. And there is no octave without sound, but sound as such isn't an octave. Right? Sound is much too general. And it's this 2-to-1 ratio of sound that is the same in all of these differences. But anyway, we got a couple of hands. I really appreciate people's interest in this. Philip and Garth and Clark.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a house. So there are a set of functions that are provided by a house, but not everything that provides those functions we call a house. Right. For example, some people live in recreational vehicles. They provide those functions, but we don't call them a house. Yeah. And some people live in a tent, and we don't call it a house. Right. So there's just the account of the essence, and then within that there says, well, parts of the account are things like a place for hygiene, a place for cooking and eating, a place for sleeping, and a place for community. Right. Those are the parts of the account of the substance of house. And even if you think about our language, like we have this old, like we used to be called a jakes or privy, an outhouse, right? It's the part of the house that's out of the house. Right. So we're pointing to like, it's included in the account. It's not outside the account, but somehow it's geographically outside. But in terms of this formal cause, it's part of the house. And I would say the genos, for a house is, one genos is human habitation. Right. But we do distinguish between jail and courthouse and house, for example. Right. But it's all part of that same genos. Right. And because it's human, right, we don't see, that's part of the humor of Gulliver's Travels, is these like houses that are 80 feet high ceilings or houses that are 1 foot high ceilings, right? None of those are part of our account of the essence. And so we find it humorous, why Swift wrote about it, I think. So, okay. So
excellent observation.
Thank you. Make sense of those three: the form, the account, the kinds, and the parts.
Fabulous. Thank you. Let me see. Garth?
Yeah, I came across two slightly different interpretations of especially number 2 here. And I sort of wanted to maybe take a minute to present both of them to try to see which one is more close to what Aristotle intended. So you can interpret it directly as saying this thing is because it is caused by its form. Its eidos is necessary for it to be at all. I guess that's one way to see it, right? But that's not the way I interpreted it. It's just the way like other people told me I was wrong. But the way I interpreted it is, if you're investigating what a thing is, implicit in your perception of the events that surround that thing are the form of the thing as you understand it. So if you don't understand the form correctly, you won't perceive the events correctly. So like my example might be a horse getting frightened by a snake. We can only understand that because we know the horse is an animal and therefore has a soul and the ability to preserve itself. If we don't understand that, then we won't understand what is going on. And I feel like the second is a little bit closer. The first one is maybe the second includes the first one in a sense, but the first one is too, it doesn't have enough content or something. I don't know.
Yeah. sorry, I'm gonna hear Clark and then I'll respond. But anybody else who wants to get into this, please do. Go ahead, Clark.
Yeah, I'm just I'm a piano technician and I work with that ratio 2-to-1. And it's just funny to give that example. It's probably the only time. But I can just existentially, I mean, this might be completely inappropriate, but as far as it being a cause of the example that he gives, Pythagoras, came up with a comma. Was Pythagoras before? Yeah, Aristotle, definitely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were very. The reason he gives this as an example, there's lots of mysticism and mystery around how the universe is ordered in such a way that the comma of Pythagoras exists. And it's deep inside the essence of something, of existence. And as a piano technician, I deal with that all the time. It's a constant mystery to me that I tune the piano in a certain way. And it is about the 2-to-1 ratio of the octaves and fifths, which are 3-to-2, and how they don't add up. And that's the comma, is the difference between the fifths, adding it up to a certain frequency, and an octave 2-to-1, adding up to a certain frequency. You come up with different frequencies, even though they're both pure. So the comma is this glitch in the universe. And I just, the account of the essence, it's deep inside as a cause. And I'm really glad number 2 is here as a cause, and the example he gave me, because I wouldn't know how to even describe that as a cause. But there's something built in,
right? And
we contend with it all the time. So that's my experiential description of what I'm getting from this, which is not the rules exactly, but anyway, thanks.
No, that's very nice, and I mean, form is used in a lot of ways, and if we think about form and matter as somehow always belonging together, then matter itself doesn't have a way it wants to be. It doesn't have a shape it wants to be in. It doesn't have a structure it wants to be in. It's pure possibility. And so one way to think about a form is just the disposition of the matter. How is the matter spread out in a certain way such that this can be something distinguishable from other things. That's still highly abstract. I know everybody wants to get closer to the form, but the form is, especially at this point, just a very abstract idea. But I think it helps if you recognize that matter itself doesn't have any way it wants to be. There is no inner drive for matter to be anything. But matter is always some forms matter. And in order for the matter sound to be an octave, then it requires this 2-1 ratio. And that's the disposition of the matter, the way in which it is organized. And so if we just think about it just at that very abstract level, right? It's an organization of matter, but not any organization of matter. It's what makes it this distinct organization of matter, right? Because it's substance or essence. And so we're starting to talking about form, we're learning to talk about substance, which we really weren't really able to say very much about in the categories. And now we're starting to get a little bit more information about how to think that kind of nature. Charles.
I just wanted to say quickly, I thought Clark expressed actually quite well what the essence is, especially mentioning the idea that it's mysterious and that it really does have the effect of being a cause, of making something to be what it is. And even though I don't know of any place that Aristotle gives any kind of a description of exactly how does a form inform a bit of matter, a portion of matter, exactly how that, technically goes or anything like that. He just simply expresses that it is there. Spends a lot of time on how does substantial change, how does one form leave and another come into a particular bit of matter. But I just really appreciated Clark's explanation.
Fabulous. Thanks for bringing that up. That's great. Okay. Sorry, I just accidentally took a look at the chat. I don't do rap. All right, let's look at 3. I mean, we're not going to exhaust this. We're going to see form in different contexts, and that's going to give it a little bit. We're going to get a little more traction on how it's used. Here, it's just kind of very formal, very almost empty account. But he gives us a little something to work with. Okay, number 3. Further, that from which the change or rest from change first starts. For example, the person who has deliberated is cause of the action, and the father of his child. And in general, the producer is cause of the thing being produced, and the change maker of what is changed being changed. How do you understand this? I mean, how do we understand how these different examples he gives? Interesting here, he doesn't talk about kinds.
That through which something comes about, the craftsman makes the bed. Living the father in their theory of how all this works, but the father is the one that brings the child about.
There had to be, I think this is kind of dealing with conditions. Right, so there's a precondition for the coming about of something because something doesn't come from nothing. And so in this case, some things are or are not conditions for other things coming about. And so when we're interested in a particular thing, we're interested in the ones that are related to its coming about.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You know, the first 2 causes we got had nothing to do with change, and now what we're getting is about changing or resting from change. Tristan, go ahead.
Can we think of this as a sort of causal chain, something temporal almost?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's Aristotelian to think of it like as an infinite chain receding into the murky past, but definitely as a very short chain. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Right, because you know the father makes the child. That there's no starting point other than the father's deliberating or being overcome with passion, who ends up making the child. But we don't get involved here. If we want to understand how the child comes about, we refer to the father or the mother, and we don't bring that back to the Big Bang or something like that. Right, and that's also gets us at this proximal cause. Maybe there would be no fathers and mothers without the Big Bang, but the Big Bang is the cause of a lot of other things too, and not just this child being born. And so it's a very remote cause, and we're looking at more proximate causes, yeah. So I just wanted to fend off certain connotations of chain. I don't know. I hope that helps. Cool. Charlie.
Hi. I think, well, the efficient cause, I think, is pretty simple. It's like having a pile of wood and you want to make a chair. And the pile of wood has the form of being a pile of wood. And the Shriner or the carpenter goes to work on the wood, and at some point the form of a pile of wood leaves and the form of a chair enters.
Right.
And the carpenter is the one who is the efficient cause of that. He is the one who has, after having thought about it and having it designed and all that, he's the one who really affects that.
That's right. So in the subset of being in which things change, the efficient cause is going to be a very important account of, it's going to be a very important aspect of any account of a thing that has matter, that has form, might have for the sake of which, but in the realm of change, this is obviously going to be that which initiates change and that which stops change. Go ahead, Mike.
So yeah, you made a very interesting comment when you said it's interesting that he didn't talk about kinds here. And was that just oversight on Aristotle's part?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. To be honest, I only noticed at that minute. I have to go look around and see if he talks about kinds of change as themselves causes. It would be strange, to be honest, but because I'm not quite sure that they're. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
I guess if I extend the question then, so using one of his examples, the father of his child, can you then say the animal of his child? Or I guess you would do the kinds for both? I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, that's good. Yeah. I mean, he says somewhere man begets man, right? And so that there is, and the reason why this man begets this child is because man begets man, or human being begets human being, right? And so there is a kind of higher order causality in that the form of a thing is transferred to what's produced. Yeah, but I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure where to go with that. But I think you're right to bring it up, and probably there is a sense in which these higher order causes are also involved in starting motion and stopping motion. But I don't have an example right on my fingertips. Thanks for that. That's good. All right, a little bit further down. Further, the end. And this is the for the sake of which. For example, of taking walks, health is the end. For why does he take walks? Quote, in order that he may be healthy, we say. Could somebody scroll down? Tyler's chat box just obscured my text. Thank you. And in speaking that way, we think we have presented the cause. Also, anything then that comes to be as an intermediate means to the end, which something else has started when something else has started the movement. For example, in the case of health, making thin, purging, drugs, or instruments, since all of these are for the sake of the end. Okay, I think that's enough. So, I mean, what's one of the things that's striking about this is Aristotle kind of interjecting when and noticing something about what people or what we understand knowledge to be. When somebody says, why is he taking a walk? And somebody says, to be healthy. that registers as a satisfactory answer. That is explanatory of this behavior. Yeah, so I just want to get at that. If somebody says, I have this written down somewhere. If somebody asks, what is a car, and you say, let me see, you say it's something spatial. It's spatial. You're right, but we know. But when in asking the question, what's a car, and getting the answer, it's spatial, we know that our question hasn't been answered, right? Even though it's a true answer. So there is this this internal understanding of what knowledge is that Aristotle is putting his finger on, and say whenever he says we say, right, he's noticing that we all are knowing beings, and the kinds of answers we give to whether an answer is whether a question has been adequately answered or not is indicative of this inner understanding of what knowledge is that his text is going to begin unpacking and explicating. So why is it that it's spatial isn't enough of an answer, right? That means that we understand our question to be intending something else than this true answer. And it's kind of an interesting, I find it a very, very interesting question that I'm not going to pursue much more. I just want to bring it to your attention that, that in asking questions, we have actually a definite sense of what an adequate answer would be, even though we don't know what that thing is that we're asking about. It's kind of like anamnesis in Plato's Meno, lurking here a little bit. If you want me to explain that, I'm happy to, but in the meantime, I will go to Tim, who's raised his hand.
Yeah, I mean, that works for number 4 when we're talking about human intention, but
Right.
but like take octave for an example.
Mm-hmm.
Humans didn't intend the octave.
Mm-hmm.
We can know it's not a spatial knowledge, but it is a rational knowledge what an octave is without knowing its end in terms of intention or purpose.
Right.
So I don't think he's saying that we need to know all 4 causes in order to know something's being, right? And purpose or end applies only to those things for which they apply.
Yes, I think so too.
Okay.
No, yes, I agree. So, yeah, no, I don't have anything. I don't want to add to that. I think we're on the same page right now. Let's enjoy it. All right. Anything else that, I mean, we didn't really talk about the Huhenica law, but I did kind of spend a lot of time at the outset. But I'm totally open to remarks or questions or nagging concerns that something's not.
Mike has a hand up.
Yeah, I know. I just want to send, but thank you. Mike, and then Charles.
So I wanted to maybe get you two off the same page then, you and Tim. I was thinking about it, and Tim, I do agree with you until I thought about it a little more.
Cool.
So the octave, so there's the octave musically, right? And when we look into it, we notice that the frequency ratio is 2 to 1. Well, why not 1.99999 to 1, or 3.14 to 1, pi to 1?
Mm-hmm.
We don't give those names, and we don't hold them in special
Right.
regard. And the octave, I guess ultimately, maybe it's N, is that it sounds pleasing, which is why we've given it this name and why it's important to us. And we know also that it has this 2 to 1 ratio. I don't know where I'm going with this, but when you were saying that it doesn't have this end, Tim, I was thinking, I think it
doesn't have what? Sorry.
An end? It doesn't have an end? Like I think there is an end in a way, right? In terms of like our music or the way we receive sounds in our ears, that interval is pleasing.
I mean, maybe I would say that our use of the octave in music is an end, and because the 2 to 1 ratio is pleasing, but that's not why there is this 2 to 1 relation, right? So we're not giving an end to why is there a 2 to 1 relation to sound. Right? He's not giving it this, at least as a Huhenica kind of example. So the end is when we employ this ratio in music, but that this ratio is at all. I don't think that he would think that there's an end that accounts for that.
I have to research it because I haven't gone into depth with this, but I think, and Peter mentioned this earlier with like prime numbers in terms of the ratios. I think there is some mathematical relationship to what sounds pleasing to us. It's not just a random thing where, oh, this sounds pleasing and it just happens to be 2 to 1. I think things that aren't, well, I don't remember. Maybe if Clark, being a piano technician, might know better, but anyway, I'm getting beyond my knowledge in terms of like the mathematics of music, but anyway.
Cool. Let me see. I got a bunch of hands, but Clark, you were just asked to engage. So if you have something short you want to say in response to Mike.
Yeah, the end is not there as I see it either, as Michael's saying. I mean, and that's demonstrated to me by the fact that it's pleasing for me to hear a fifth, an interval of a fifth, which is a 3 to 2 ratio. And it's pleasing for me to hear a 2 to 1 ratio, which is an octave. But the two together over the span of 8 octaves come up with different notes at the end. They're the same note, but they're not pleasing. They're not pleasing between the two. There's something about the universe that has fifths. When you add them up together, you start on the same note, and you add them up with fifths, or you add them up with octaves, beginning and ending on the same note, you end up with a different note. And that is not pleasing. And there's no end from that. It seems random, it seems unusual, and that's the big mystery.
It's almost like the incommensurability of a rectangle. Let me see, I think there was, let me see, I think Charlie, Tyler, Tim.
Well, I think Tim wanted to say something
Okay.
maybe about the octave.
Okay, let's defer.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I was just going to say that, yeah, it was kind of what Clark said, but that it's probably a feature of wave interference, and there is, if we were to assign end to everything we discover, then all scientific discovery we then would assign in this kind of end by virtue of having named it or discovered it. So I don't think that's the point of end that Aristotle is getting at here. That's my.
And I like that. And I'm just going to say one sentence. For the Platonic tradition, there are distinct levels of intelligibility, and not everything is equally intelligible, and not everything is its end is readily apparent and stuff like that. That which is more end, that which exists more and more through its end becomes more and more intelligible, and that's why the most intelligible of all is mind itself, which is pure end. So I'm comfortable saying that not everything is equally intelligible. The closer it is to endless, right? No Huhenica, the less intelligible it is as to why it is the way it is. All right. So let me see, Charlie and then Tyler.
Well, just briefly, 2 things. I would think the end of, now I don't know why he expressed it in the idea of the octave and all that, but I would think the end of the idea of music here would be harmony and pleasure, and that certainly would have a
yeah, so exactly. Yeah, making the music is an end, right? And like Tim will remind us correctly, it's an intention, and so we can understand the purposive nature of it based on that. But there, in Tim's sense, there is no intention behind 1-2 ratio being pleasing.
Yeah, I have no idea what to talk about that. And the other thing is, I think you do have to have all 4 of these causes in order to give an account of a substance or to give an account of something.
Well, let's see how it is.
I mean, he says in the next paragraph, in the next line, he says, now these are pretty much all the ways in which things are said to be causes. I guess he might have thought of other things too. And, he doesn't say this is an absolute account of all causes, period. But
he does it in the metaphysics, not here, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think, oh, well, at any rate, that's all.
Thank you. Tyler.
Yeah, I was gonna say that to get at what Mike was, I think maybe going in the direction toward is that we can ask why we're able to make certain distinctions and not others, and also why we take some distinctions to be more relevant, worthy of naming, worthy of categorizing. And so in the latter sense, you would appeal to music for some kinds of sounds, right? But in the former sense, you need more than just music, because you would have to account for the fact that we have organs, right, that allow us to make the kinds of distinctions of sounds that we do. And so there are different kinds of, even in the example of sounds, we can think of different causes for why we're able to distinguish different sounds from others, and why we distinguish between the distinctions we make in different ways.
You
And
follow?
that's probably going to get to, I think we're probably going to get to happiness at some point soon, but well, anyway.
Soon is good. I like that. Eternal optimism. All right, so we just work through very difficult text. Hopefully it's a little bit, have a little firmer sense of how these different, in what sense each one of these are different cause. Let me see. So he starts to get into the coincidental causes, and that's one of the things I wanted to focus on. So we can't read all the rest of the section, but maybe a paragraph or two and discuss them. But if somebody wouldn't mind just reading the next paragraph, the one that Charlie began. These then are pretty much all.
I'll read it.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
These then are pretty much all the ways in which things are said to be causes. And because they are said to be such, in many ways it follows both A, that there are many causes of the same thing, and not coincidentally, as for example, a statue has both the craft of sculpture and the bronze as causes, not in accord with its being another thing, but insofar as it is a statue, although not in the same way, but the one as matter and the other as that, and the other as that form which the movement derives.
That from, can you stop there? I think that's always going to do with coincidental here in this paragraph. So
yeah,
let's talk about, what's he talking about here? What's he going on about?
He's saying that there can be multiple causes of one thing. He's not that, which I just want to point out, he hasn't made this point yet, but that doesn't mean that every cause is applicable to everything.
Fair enough. So yeah, exactly. So multiple causes. And then he says, and not coincidentally. And then he gives a little explication here. Right? What do you make of this explication? As, for example, a statue has both the craft of sculpture and the bronze as causes. So multiple causes. Not in accord with its being another thing, but insofar as it is a statue. What do you make of that?
I'm going to jump in because I haven't had a chance, but
awesome.
Somewhere else he gives the example of the doctor is concerned with health, but when he's a patient, he's only concerned with health coincidentally when he gets fixed. So it's coincidentally, maybe it was in in Athens that this statue was made, but that's not one of the causes of the making of the statue. It's only those things that are directly related to the thing, qua what it is.
So not in accord with its being another thing, but insofar as it's a statue. What do you make of that?
So a statue is many things at once if we're talking about this statue. But with respect to its statueness, the sculpture and the bronze are related to its being able to have that form or that secondary substance, we might say. But there are other things about this statue that are accidental to its being that form.
Like what?
So, like the where it is, for example, as I think Peter was pointing out in some fashion.
So I mean, the way I thought about this, and I just want to hear what you have to say about it. But so I was thinking about when he first talked about bronze and silver as matter, and he talked about the kinds, and then Mike designated the kind as metal. Now, whatever causes metal to be metal, say, I don't know, subterranean pressure or something like that, or right? Subterranean and certain on certain elements, right, is one of the causes of metal being metal, but it's not one of the causes of the statue being a statue, right? So without that cause of metal, there wouldn't be the metal that the statue is. And nevertheless, it's not explanatory of it being a statue. It's only explanatory of it being metal. But what we're looking at, we're understanding the being of the statue, not the being of the metal. And so the metal, whatever led to the metal being metal, is coincidental to what we're investigating, namely the being of the statue. Greg.
I'm going to steal your favorite explanation before you do. The unity of that item. If they weren't, I mean, they're two different causes, but they have to be two different causes of the same thing. Whereas you can have those two different causes, but one in a truck, right, and one in a statue. And that's going to disrupt, or that's going to be behind his next example.
Awesome. No,
they can have one cause that can have non-unitary effects.
That's right. That's right. So Aristotle's a master of distinctions, and what he's distinguishing is the cause of the statue is not a cause of the material of the statue is not a cause of the statue. It's the cause of the matter of the statue. Those are two different questions. Right? And so he's directing us to the very specific, the specificity of the kind of inquiry he's pursuing in this book, The Physics, and that he'll be pursuing in a different way in the metaphysics. And so these coincidental causes, right? You can imagine a sophist, saying, well, the cause of anything is everything, right? And so everything is always the right answer. And to the question, what caused that? Well, everything. And Aristotle's bringing in distinctions through his four causes and the kinds to which these causes belong to give us much more granularity in thinking about that thing whose being we're investigating. And so we need these discriminations in order to get at the thing and not be deflected and go down a false path, because at the beginning we might see that there's something, that metal has something to do with the statue, and so what we need really is an account of metal and not account of the statue. And Aristotle's distinctions between these primary and coincidental causes is just is a way of making us much more exact, as he often puts it, in what we're inquiring into. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems sort of like a little different than what we had in the categories.
Yeah.
The account of a secondary substance sort of transferred down to the primary substance. But here for these causes, if the account of metal is coincidental to the account of the statue, then it's not that this is not flowing down in that same way, it seems. And I'm also beginning to wonder whether or not even saying it's bronze, the more specific thing, is actually only coincidental to the statue, qua statue.
Right. So are you so I hope you're distinguishing between accidental and coincidental.
Yes.
Okay. Because it sounded like you. Okay. Right, because bronze is obviously coincidental to a statue. It can be made out of granite or something like that, right? So accidental to the statue. But in what sense the bronze would be coincidental and not just accidental to the statue, I haven't grasped. Do you want to follow up on that, or?
No, I didn't have anything there.
Okay, Mike.
Wouldn't you just be saying, and this could be obvious to everyone, and if it is, I'll just shut up, but, and not coincidentally, so the two things that are the causes, the bronze, which is the material cause, and the craft, which is the efficient cause, it just means they're not, they don't act as causes at the same time. Is that oversimplifying it? Am I way off?
To be honest, your feed lagged a minute, and so I didn't quite get your question.
Sorry. So what I was so here in this case in the statue, that there are two causes, right? Bronze, which is the material cause, and the craft of sculpture, which is the efficient cause. Does it just mean that they're both causes of this statue, but the act of the cause or the time of the cause wasn't at the same time? Do you know what I mean?
I don't see the temporality thing.
Do you mean time in a sort of, they're not causes in the same respect rather than not the same time?
Yeah.
Are you getting at respects? Yeah.
Yeah, in that, let's say maybe it was, this statue was marble, right? So you had the marble, the unformed marble already, it was always there or whatever. And then when the sculptor came, that was after it was marble. So that the two causes were not coincident in a way.
Right.
I guess they are, I don't know.
And do you have a response to Mike?
I think I understand what Mike's getting at. To me, it sounds like we can't separate the two causes, like they are non-divorceable. And yeah, there's a fusion going on, perhaps. That's my take.
Yeah, I would say that it really it breaks down when you think about, let's say, what they're doing with the Hadron Collider. I mean, they're creating new stuff in a natural, but it has that intention. So it's at the same time that you have both the material cause and the intention. So it doesn't strictly apply temporally, but like Tyler said, it is the respect to what aspect of the thing that's being given account for.
Right. Clark.
Yeah, I just wanted to put a vote in for Mike, because I think that very simple, just literal look at it. There are many causes of the same thing, and those causes are not coincident necessarily. That's what I'm reading into it, and it's so causes it has a temporal aspect there, and the temporal aspect comes from the word coincidentally.
Ah, that's where you're getting at. Okay.
That's where I'm getting it. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong reading also, as Mike is saying, but I'm getting temporality from coincidentally.
Yeah, there's no, but my objection to that, and why I'd want to understand this slightly differently, is because when the sculptor crafts the statue, he's crafting the bronze. And so there's no temporal difference here between the crafting and the thing crafted. It's not like first the crafting happens and then we get the bronze, or that the bronze becomes a sculpture at the same time as the craft of sculpting sculpts it. And so I don't see any temporal gap here.
Well, but maybe it's not saying that there has to be a gap, but there are many causes, and the causes can be have their own integrity. I'm not using the right words, but
that makes sense.
Yeah, they don't have their own they don't. There's not crossover. There's many causes, different causes, and the temporality is not the point. They could be in sync in some temporal sense, or out of sync in some temporal sense. So not coincidentally is saying they don't have to be coincident.
Okay, I think I see the point, and I think so. What I would like to do is I'd like to take one more paragraph. If somebody could scroll down to the next page and look at what he says about coincidental causes and see whether Clark and Mike's account holds here or whether it needs to be modified. So the second paragraph. Further, there are coincidental causes and their kinds. For example, as a cause of a statue, in one way, Polykleitos, in another, a sculptor, because the sculptor coincides with Polykleitos. And as examples of what includes the coincidental cause, a human is a cause of the statue, or in general, an animal, because Polykleitos is human and a human is an animal. And among coincidental causes, some are more remote than others, some less. For example, if the pale and the musical were said to be the causes of the statue, because Polykleitos is pale and musical. So I see coincidental as being kind of more and more remote, higher order causes. But I want to hear from you guys about how you're reading this and whether, what you think.
So I think one thing we could say is that with respect to a sculptor, right, there are all sorts of facts about the sculpture or the sculptor which don't end up helping us understand why what he creates is a sculpture. And so all of these features of the person which do in some sense factor into the sculpture becoming what it is, insofar as the creator of the sculpture had to have secondary substances, but those secondary substances are not related to why something is a sculpture.
Yeah, okay. So I guess what I'm responding to right now is that I think that the coincidental causes are important to Aristotle, and he doesn't want to call them coincidental as being not relevant. But I think that he is pointing to kind of an order of proximity and remoteness, and getting us to focus on that order of proximity and remoteness. In order to get clearer about what's relevant to what we're trying to understand. And the way I was talking before made it sound a little bit like the coincidental causes are irrelevant. But this example here indicates to me that they are relevant, right? And his first example, as a cause of a statue, in one way Polykleitos, in another way a sculptor, because the sculptor coincides with Polykleitos, right? And so here we have coincidental cause, but one is not important and the other unimportant. See what I'm saying? So, yeah. Is the mic or So Tyler, do you want to follow up on what I just said?
Well, so I'm focusing on here among the coincidental causes, some are more remote. So he does say remote and some less, but he also mentions pale and musical as causes of the statute.
Right.
Pale and musical are not, so if we asked why something is a statue and we told someone that the sculptor of the statue is pale and musical, I only see that that person is a sculptor to be relevant to its being a statue. However, I can understand that the efficient cause, if a sculptor is the efficient cause of the sculpture, then all of the things that the sculptor is do go into its becoming a statue, but they are very remote, as you say.
Right.
But I may be missing something there.
See, either Mike or Clark, do you have anything to say? You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you got thoughts, I'm interested.
Yeah, and I'm reading, I'm just reading this. I think you're right. I think the coincidental does not refer to the temporality. So going back to that previous paragraph, I think what he's saying there then, now that I read this again, so going back to the previous paragraph, that there are many causes of the same thing and not coincidentally. So for this statue, we have the bronze, and then we have the sculptor, the efficient cause. If the sculptor were also made of bronze, then but yeah, not okay. I get that now.
No, but it seems to me like now that this discussion has actually helped me understand the point better. So I really I do appreciate this. That any cause is going to have, it's going to belong to a species, it's going to belong to a genus, it's going to have a differentia, right? It's going to be a very complex thing, and all of these things are part of what that cause is, and therefore play a role in its being a cause, right? And so in that sense, it seems like every cause or every effect automatically has many causes, because even if there's one cause, all the things that are involved in that cause being the thing that it is are part of the cause, and therefore it sounds like many causes. But I think he's just making a distinction between the fact that there are multiple causes to any one thing, and not just those coincidental causes like pale and musical in the sculptor. But indeed, there is no sculpture without the bronze or the matter, and there is no sculpture without the craft and form, and the rest of it. But anyway, Tim, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think we're getting thrown by our English use of coincide. In Latin, incidents had more to do with agreement, and so things to be rationally the same. So I don't think there's any temporality etymologically, and so logically, I don't think it's necessary to the point either.
I was wondering about, is it only a primary substance be an efficient cause or a cause of something? At least an efficient cause, maybe. In the sense that since sculpture was coincidental, and man and everything else was coincidental, right. It was only polyclitus was a primary substance.
Right.
I haven't quite worked that through, but it seemed maybe that was.
Yeah. That's I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think you're right. He's going to say, writers cause manuscripts, and this writer causes this manuscript. right? And so the only reason why this writer can cause this manuscript is because writers cause manuscripts. And so we have that. Go ahead.
Is that getting towards the formal cause in some sense of the writing? Is the being Polyclitus or somebody, well, Polyclitus acting as a sculptor?
Mm-hmm.
Is his activity?
Yeah.
This is, I think
I like
this
that.
is, so, and you also need the primary substance to account for the unity of the secondary substances, which go into the causing of the sculpture.
Right.
But there are the secondary substances, right, have a different relation to the sculpture. So being skilled at crafts or at sculpting specifically, right, has a different relation to the fact that it's become a sculpture than the paleness.
Right.
Right.
Okay, let me see. We're getting 2-minute warning. I'm going to get to you right away, Garth. I want to hear from you. So, but I'm just going to say, because people are going to start bailing at 6. So awesome discussion. Very difficult. We didn't get nearly through as much text as I assigned. So, okay. But what I would really like to talk about next time is the knowledge stuff that you read in the Nicomachean Ethics, and make a little bit of sense of that. And then I would like to turn to the final chapters of Metaphysics Alpha. I don't want to talk about the historical part so much. I think that's more or less comprehensible on one's own. But I do want to talk about what his critique of his predecessors are. How did these causes get misconceived, according to him? And that's very interesting, because that gives us even more information as to what the nature of these causes are. So I'll post that ASAP, hopefully by tomorrow, those pages, and I promise not to assign any more reading for the next week, so we can get through some of this stuff. But I think that his critique of his predecessors is really illuminating as to how he understands these causes. Now we've kind of broken them down in a classificatory way, and then we're going to see how his predecessors used them and what he thinks is what they've misunderstood about what's the relationship between a cause and the thing caused. Anyway, yeah, so that's very cool. Garth, I would love to hear your thoughts. I apologize for running over you.
That's okay. I actually left the room for a second, so if you called on me right away, that would have been awkward. I want to say, I think that these causes should be interpreted in terms of like developing theoretical wisdom or scientific understanding, rather than just saying what happened.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the reasons he talks about coincidence is because you can sort of move away from the particular experience to the general rules, I guess. I don't know if I'm using the right word.
No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm just contemplating. It makes sense to me, but if you want to flesh that out a little bit, that'd be welcome.
Also,
so you're saying that in order to get the generality of the specific cause, that it's not just this here, right? But it is said of many things, right? And so the scope of its causality is much broader than this right here.
right, like if you want to differentiate human from animal, right? Like what kind of things do humans cause that animals can't cause? Might be an example.
Right. Now, for some reason, it just occurred to me, but you said that this might not be related at all, but it just occurred to me, right? Greeks don't use this term, but Latins, thinking about Greeks, use it all the time, and the term is qua, right? And so, and it just occurred to me that when we're talking about, for instance, Polyclitus being the sculptor, right? And Polyclitus is an animal, and so there's a sense in which the animal is a cause of the sculpture. If Polyclitus, who's human, is a cause of the sculpture. But obviously there are more proximate and more remote causes, and the Latins will say that it's Polyclitus qua sculpture and not Polyclitus qua animal that is the cause of the sculpture, right? And so we're going to get that differentiation through this qua to be more specific. Polyclitus has many different accidental and essential properties, right? And so when we say Polyclitus sculpts, and we want to understand, what kind of knowledge, for instance, this requires, or what kind of activity it is, or what kind of thing that can cause, we need to differentiate between the proximate and remote causes in terms of what the thing is that we're ultimately interested in, namely the sculpture. And so I just wanted to say that qua use is actually gets at exactly the same thing that Aristotle is doing here, but perhaps with a little bit more elegance. Tim.
Yeah, this is an ignorant comment because I wasn't quite following what Garth's point was, but it just struck me that you could say that an animal is the cause of an animal statue in terms of its form, right? Mm-hmm. Even though it's not the cause in terms of the end, right, or in terms of the material. Anyway, this silly, stupid, obvious point, but
no, not at all. No, I mean, I think we need to bring up precisely those kind of points to get us out of our ordinary ways of thinking, right? Because we want to comprehend Aristotle, and he doesn't think like we do. And that might be a problem. That might damn him. That might not damn him. But we need to get into that mode of thinking about the things that a Greek would have thought about when trying to understand this. When walking around with Aristotle out of doors, chatting about this stuff. Anyway, unfortunately, I got to go. Usually, I like to stick around for a beer, but this time I got to go. But thank you very much for all of your interest and participation in this last couple of hours. I would have loved to have heard from more of you, but the ones I did hear from, you're awesome. I appreciate it. And see you next week. So let me see. I think this is like the 4th week. So we're halfway through this first unit. So we're just going to kind of breathlessly do this stuff and break ourselves into Aristotle's way of thinking and Aristotle's way of speaking. And then we get to take presumably 4-week break and pursue other interests, and then we'll come back. And I guarantee you, this is going to be, all of a sudden, it's going to be like familiar and friendly, and you're going to be able to navigate it so much better. So because you've had a little chance to get away from it, and then everyone's in your daily life or in your other readings, something's going to remind you of Aristotle, and that thing you didn't understand all of a sudden flares up in your mind. And it's like, oh, that's what it was about. So anyway.
Are you sure it's only the 4th time? I thought we were approaching like,
this might be the 5th time.
But it doesn't really matter. It's just.
No, it doesn't matter. We started on January 28th.
So on January 28th.
So
so we've been at it almost 2 months now. Wait, no, sorry.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so this is the 5th. The 5th meeting, and
okay, so the 5th, yeah, all right, that sounds a little better.
Well, the 18th will be our last meeting. I hope that's not. I might be traveling, but I'm sure I'll have internet, so I don't think there'll be any reason not to meet on the 18th, unless everybody's traveling because of break or something. Then we can bump it a week. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank
Love
you.
seeing you. Take care. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.